Hi, I'm Emilie, author of the Xeris Galaxy Saga, among other things.
And I'm Christen, author of the YA rom-com It Happened at Christmas, among other things.
And we're excited to welcome you to The Margins, a podcast where we have candid conversations about the writing life, indie and traditional publishing, the writing process and life, and more.
And today's candid conversation topic is hacking your writing output with dictation, featuring our new friend, Seth Ring.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
So it's exceptionally awesome for me because I'm also a reading fan of yours. So for those of us, though, who are listening who don't know who you are, could you give us just like a little overview of all the things that you do?
Sure. So we might be here for a while.
Yeah, I should say maybe some of the things you do.
So my name is Seth Ring. I've been an author for the past 7 years. I have been writing like mad that whole time. Productivity is an interest of mine, and so I have written about 50 books over the last 6 years, and just shy of 50. By the end of this year, I'll have broken well past it. In addition to that, I really like world building, and I really like board games. So I have a board game company, and I put my process sort of online for other people to use. So I have a dictation software that I sell, and yeah. So that's a brief overview. But I write lit RPG, which is a science fiction fantasy genre that is growing like mad. And I've been in it since the beginning of the genre, so it's been really cool to watch that grow and expand. But I'm looking forward to continuing for a long time writing books.
Yeah, I will like throw in here that I'm like, I want to write lit RPG because I've read so many of your books and others. I'm a big
Yeah,
Dungeon Crawler Carl fan.
yeah,
But it's also I'm not much like I'm not a huge gamer. So I'm like, can I
sure.
even do it if I'm not a gamer? But I'm like, I've read so much that I feel like I can. So
The answer is yes. The answer is
just go
yes.
for it.
Because
That's what I keep
because
telling her.
yeah, being a gamer isn't a prerequisite. Lit RPG is really a style of writing more than a genre. It's any story that has a game element involved in the plot or the world building. And so as long as you have something that is game related, it's going to fall under the umbrella of lit RPG. I write a lot of sort of classic fantasy, classic science fiction tropes. It's not specific to people playing a game. It's just there's a gamified element to the world or the plot, and that drives progression. And so if you read a lot of lit RPG, yeah, you're absolutely suited to write it as well.
I'm very tempted, and I want to do it in space because that's my brand. So
There you
I'm like,
go.
I dropped into some type of space world. But anyways,
Mhm.
I'll stop nerding out. Yeah.
Seth, when we chatted
Mhm.
at Realm Makers, you had mentioned that you write a book a month, and you usually do
Yeah,
the bulk of that within a week
correct.
of that month. And so we were really curious, what does like a typical day of writing look like for you during that intense period?
During that intense period, it looks like being very intentional about any any sort of distraction or really any input that's coming into my head. And so I will typically wake up between 4 and 5 in the morning, and I will start writing immediately. I then take a break at about 6 o'clock to help my kids get on the bus and have breakfast. And then at 7, I'm back down in my office. I start writing again. I actually run a writing stream, and I'll stream myself writing on YouTube, and I'll run writing sprints, which are from the Pomodoro technique. And I'll run half an hour sprints, and then I'll take a couple minutes in between to take a breath, and then I'll just keep going. And I run that until about noon. At noon, I try to exercise and I try to eat lunch, and then I start writing again. And by 1, I'm back to it. Oftentimes it's 1 to 1:30, depending on how long everything takes. But then I'll start writing again, and I will write until about 4. At 4, I process all of the dictation that I've done for the day. I then go through and I edit. And then, depending on sort of life circumstances, uh, at um, at 6 o'clock, well, at 5 or 6 o'clock, depending on how our day is going, we have dinner as a family. That is an absolute non-negotiable, sort of like breakfast. Um, we do that, and then either I'll just hang out for the evening and get to bed early, or I'll go back down at around 7 and I'll continue writing, um, depending on how awake my brain is or like how clicked in my brain is. I'll continue writing until uh, about 9 o'clock, and then I'm heading to bed. And then the next day looks exactly the same. And the next day looks exactly the same. And the next day looks exactly like it's just 6 days of that, right?
Okay.
And there are a couple of things that really enable me to do that. One is that I leave my phone at my bedside. And often the first time I pick it up during the day is right before I go to bed to make sure that my alarm is set. And so I literally do not have the phone on me within reach at any point during the day. And that is tremendously helpful. And then, because again, the goal is mitigating any sort of distraction, which means I have to limit the amount of information that comes into me. Otherwise, it'll just pull me off into whatever. But then the other piece of it is that I have 4 kids. I have a wife and dogs and a busy life, but my wife and I sort of have this arrangement that she manages all of those things excellently, by the way. But she manages all of those things, and she knows like at what threshold things are serious enough that she needs to come and knock on my door and say, "Seth, pause," and we're gonna deal with whatever life is, right? And that happens. And sometimes, I'm in the middle of an intense writing day and I'm disrupted because something has happened and I have to switch tracks, and that's fine. But in general, she tries to guard that space for me as much as possible, because that allows me then to pack all of this work into a really short time, this sort of like sprint that rushes all the way from the beginning to the end of the book. And those 6 days include the world building, it includes the plotting, it includes the drafting, and it includes the editing. And so the goal is that by the end of 6 days, I have 120,000 polished words ready to be sent for the last edit, my grammar edits, and then I can send it from there to the formatter, and at that point we're done, right? We have a book, and so that whole process takes about it takes about 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Front to back, to get a book completely done. And it, obviously it depends on how many disruptions happen during that process.
Okay, so there's so many questions. But I looked into your course and everything that you're offering online, which we definitely want to talk about that. And the first thing I thought was like 16 sounds amazing. Just totally great, especially with just a busy life. But then also you had mentioned like concentrated bursts, which is what you just described. And I'm like, that makes so much sense with just the way that a story flows, and having a more cohesive story, because you're not thinking like, okay, it's that meme of Gandalf, like, or is it Gandalf? I think, like, I have no memory of this place, like, what did I write yesterday or 5 days ago? But with all of that, I'm very curious. A couple of questions here. I'll start with one, hopefully. Have you, and I don't know if you've like always been doing this process from when you began, but has that process changed? Because Christen and I know her process pretty well. She knows mine because we talk about it a lot. I feel like I do tend to be a plotter, but I'm a very detailed plotter. And so when I'm writing, things still change and I let inspiration strike. But it's like, it is a process, and I don't know about like fitting it into that, typical 6 days that you talk about. So has that shifted for you as you've like grown as a writer, or did you start off that way? Like, fill us in.
Yeah. So I started much more traditionally. It would take me a few months, a year to write a book. And that's because I was sort of working my way through it slowly. But I kept running into this problem, which was I would forget what happened earlier in the book. And I would either have to go back and reread, which I hate doing,
Mhm.
or I would have to just hope that I had
Forge
gotten the
ahead.
details
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And I found myself trying to keep really detailed notes. But anybody who's written a book knows that it is really disruptive to pause when you're in the middle of flow writing to add notes. And
Mhm.
it's very annoying to have to go back and comb through your work to add notes after the fact. So there's
Mm.
literally no good way to add notes in the flow and actually maintain flow.
Mhm.
For anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, flow state is optimal experience. Like it's human optimal experience. And there's been a lot of study around flow state and learning how to trigger it, learning how to create it, learning how to manipulate it. And so so a lot of what I do is based around this idea that you can actually tune your surroundings and your internals to produce what is recognized as an optimal experience. Optimal doesn't always mean best. That's important, right? Optimal just means efficient. And so I can produce a really, really efficient work um, process or a really efficient work period. Um, the question is just, is that the thing I should be doing at the time, or is it not the thing I should be doing at the time? So sometimes it's not good. But I talk a lot about flow. My whole process is based around flow. When I started writing, though, I was writing very traditionally. I would just sort of sit down and be like, I have this idea. Let me type some things out. Let me go back through and let me refine it. Let me edit it. Um, but again, as I got further into my career, I realized that I'm just losing the story. Often I would read back through a book and be like, man, I started on this trajectory and I ended way over here. Like halfway through, I just forgot what the quest was, like what the characters were trying to do, and I just wrote something else. And that really bothered me. And so I started thinking, okay, well, how do I address that problem? How do I fix that from a craft perspective? One way is to plot more. But every time I would plot more, and I went through this whole period of like finding all of my friends who are writers who are really good at plotting and being like, teach me your method. Like, I'm going to literally sit down and run your method. And every single time, I stopped enjoying the book because I was pre writing too much. And I'm very much a discovery writer, so I didn't enjoy that. For some people, that works. For me, it didn't. So then it was a matter of, okay, well, how do I maintain cohesion inside my story? How do I maintain coherency in my world and not forget all these details? Well, I observed that when you read a book, if you read it in a couple of days, it's easy to keep the story in mind. If you read it over a couple of months, it's impossible, right? You're constantly going to be forgetting the little details that are potentially important to the story. If you have read a book a long time ago, chances are you remember some of it, but not all of it. And I started to think about sort of the function of time and creativity. And most writers are high idea generation, right? We generate a ton of ideas. The problem is that we only have the capacity to hold a certain number of them in our brain. So I figured out that if I just did it faster, if I just wrote the way that I read, which is as fast as possible, as much as possible, all of a sudden it becomes a non issue. I can hold all of the story in my head because I'm living in the story. And if I write a book in 6 days, it is it is coherent from front to back and it is cohesive naturally because the last like I started 6 days ago, right? There is no time to forget what is going on. Plus, if you are intentional and conscious about your about filtering what information comes into you during that period of time, you end up living in this space with these characters in a way that you can't if you're stretching it out over a couple of months or even 1 month, and you are dealing with all of the things life has for you to deal with at the same time. So my process has definitely evolved over time, and it's because of this need to maintain coherency and cohesion and my complete inability to take good notes. Um,
Out of
so
necessity, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
do you read while you're writing? Like, do you like at night if you're like before bed or something? Do you
I
read or do
don't.
you not let yourself? Okay, I was
Well,
curious.
that's
Like,
that's not entirely true. I listen to a lot of nonfiction audiobooks,
okay. Mm-hmm.
and during the time that I try to exercise, I listen to nonfiction audiobooks. And the
That makes
reason is
sense.
because um, there have been a lot of studies done around attention and and using and like brain power.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do a lot of work in the morning, your brain is going to go, ugh, I am so tired. I can't do anything else, right? I can't write anymore. If you just say, well, let me go and do something like watch TV to relax, or let me go and do some sort of mindless consumption, uh, you actually maintain that state of mental exhaustion. You might be physically less exhausted, but you actually maintain the state of mental exhaustion. If, on the other hand, you switch tasks and you do something that requires your brain to work, but in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
you'll actually recharge your creativity and your brain, right?
Oh, I
Your
love
brain
that.
doesn't get tired the way your body gets tired. It gets
Mhm.
tired in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can actually that's why, exercise, getting physical motion, getting food, and um, and doing something that requires a different kind of mental effort
Mm-hmm.
actually allows me to do a really intensive morning of writing. I typically am writing 13 to 15,000 words in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can write 10,000 words in the afternoon, 7 to 10,000 words in the afternoon, and edit if
Mm-hmm.
I have been intentional about resetting my brain
Mm-hmm.
creatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I listen to a lot of nonfiction audiobooks, typically around a subject that I'm interested in, theology or business or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, and then I can go back and I can be creative again.
Hmm.
Because the other thing that does is it doesn't compete with my story for space.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
again, it's a different piece of my brain that's processing all of this
Mm-hmm.
information.
That makes sense. That's
Yeah.
that's really fascinating.
So you're writing like 20 to 25,000 words a day. Are you also editing that? Are you
Yes.
editing what you're okay?
Yes, but I have a very particular editing process.
Okay.
And
Oh, fill us in. Fill us in.
listen, the more I talk about this, the more I realize that it's just very abnormal. What I'm doing is
Yeah.
very
You're like, this
abnormal.
is not like anyone else. Yeah.
No, no. But what's cool is that anybody can do it, or they can
Mm-hmm.
adapt pieces of it to what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing and find value in it.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily recommend that people do exactly what I do. I do it to manage myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, again, sort of necessity. I
Mm-hmm.
either write a lot or I don't write anything. So I'm not, I don't have that middle ground. If
Yeah.
you can have the middle ground, have the middle ground is what I would say. But the uh, this editing process works again a little bit differently. So I was struck at one point. I don't like editing particularly. I'm not bad at it. I'm good enough, to take what I'm doing, and even if it's relatively clean the first time, to improve it, to refine it, that kind of stuff. I'm able to do that. But I had this thought, which was that this is taking up too much time. What if I just did it right the first time? And
That's what we all think, right?
right? But what's interesting about that is if you understand how skills are built just in general, you can actually target that specifically. So I have a particular voice that I want. And when I started writing, I couldn't hit it the first time. It always required some sort of like revision pass for me to be able to sort of add the magic. like make sure that it was perfect. And then I thought, well, hold on a second. I trained myself to type. I trained myself to communicate what is in my head through my fingers, just sort of naturally in a flow state. Why not just teach myself to do it correctly the first time? So that's what I've been focusing on is, and the same way I taught myself for a prior job how to speak, right? So I can stand up in front of people and I can speak extemporaneously about pretty much any subject. It might not be interesting if I don't know anything about the subject, but I can do it.
Yeah.
Again, that's just a skill set. That's a skill of being able to take what's in my head and communicate it through my voice based on the feedback that I'm getting from the people who are listening. Well, why not just learn how to articulate, because I'm dictating, articulate the story the way I want it to be told and the way I want it to sound the first time. So I spend a lot of effort and energy on that, which means that I need very little actual editing. Now, that doesn't mean I need no editing. You're always going to need some editing. But instead of doing it myself, I've outsourced it. So I have about 15 to 20 people who read through my work every day after I'm finished. I upload it. They read through it. They make comments. They edit it. They tell me what's good. They tell me what's not. But these are not editors. These are my core audience. These are the people who will ultimately buy my books.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell me whether they like it or not. And then I can adjust and I can say, you know what? You said that you don't like this, but I don't care. Creatively, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. Or I say, oh yeah, actually that's a really great point, and I'm clearly not communicating to you in a way that you're understanding. So let me adjust it and let me make sure that what I'm saying is being communicated properly. And then I make that mental note of like, okay, every time I'm in this situation, I need to be talking about it in this specific way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need to be communicating with this kind of clarity, or I need to be the characters need to be making not just certain decisions, but they need to be communicating the decisions they've made in a certain way. It could be any number of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then as I'm improving my craft, based on this feedback that I'm getting, not from editors, but from my core reader, what that means is that when I take my book and I give it to another reader, they're going to love it because they're part of that same core demographic. They want that same personal genre that I'm writing. After that, I take it and I give it to an actual editor, right, who can go through it. But by that point, it has been written in my voice. It has been tested against my readers. I know whether they like it. I know whether they don't like it. I've made the adjustments that need to be made. And there's very little left to do. There's very little work left to do, which is what makes this process so quick. And so every day they're going through and reading it and leaving their comments, and a lot of them like spelling corrections or grammar corrections or whatever, and they'll do that too. And then I'm checking it the next day and I'm using it to,
Okay.
And
I
then I
wasn't sure
use
if
it.
it was something you don't look at until you're done, because that's me.
No.
Because I like don't want to know until I'm done.
Sure.
But
So in my opinion, it is better to look at it immediately because it allows you to course correct while you're in the book, right? It is very difficult to refine or to edit a giant manuscript. If I had to edit 120,000 words, often I find it sort of paralyzing because there are so many variables and there's so much little tweaking that has to happen, because even if I just add a scene, I now have to link it into all of the surrounding scenes, and I might have to reference it again in the future. There's all of this connective tissue that has to happen. If, on the other hand, because I write linearly, this doesn't work if you don't write linearly, but because I do, I can course correct right away, and I'm not spending the time. I'm not having to wait and do the harder task after the fact. I'm actually just making less work by pausing and fixing whatever the problem is immediately.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
it's a different way of thinking about it. And it does require you being willing to sort of throw your initial draft out there and get that brutal feedback of like, this
Yeah.
just doesn't work. Like there's something
Mhm.
massively wrong here. Go back and rewrite. But what I found is that over time, I have had to do less and less and less rewriting, less and less and
Mhm.
less adding, because there's better alignment between my creative vision for this work and my skill set because
Mhm.
I'm getting immediate feedback, right? Because I'm being able to iterate immediately, which actually helps you improve your skill faster as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As somebody who is currently like up to her eyeballs in edits on a deadline, I'm like, wow,
It
I
sounds
wish I
great.
would.
Yeah.
It does. It sounds amazing.
Well, and I had the opposite problem because I don't mind readers reading. Like I do a lot of serialized fiction. I'm fine with
Hmm.
that. But I don't like the distraction in my head, probably because I'm so honed in on like this is the vision that I have. And so it's more of like I want to check those things later for like the small things that they've found, but like I'm not I know what I want to write, which is probably a problem sometimes. But that makes a lot of sense as to why
Yeah.
you would want to like see that feedback in real time. So I was like, I have to rethink what I'm doing, I guess.
No, I love it. I'm like, okay, now I just have to build up like my little
Yeah,
core
reader
group
base. Yeah.
of like reader base,
Hmm.
and yeah.
Well, it sounds, and this is going to sound really corny, but like, we're told, oh, if you want to sell, like write to market, but you're writing to reader. And I think that that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I mean, those are the people who are buying your books, right? Like
That's right.
they are your readers. So, yeah, that's fascinating. So okay, this is
Yeah.
like totally taking us in a different direction. So, oh, and here's the cat. She always comes. Welcome, Pages. But this is like just a side note. How far ahead are you in your publishing calendar then? With regards to like, cause I mean, like I know I just started your new series, and I think you said book 3 is coming out. I'm like, I haven't even gotten to book 2 yet, So I assume because of the massive amount of books that you write per year, you're pretty far ahead. But I'm curious, how do you like manage that?
It depends. It depends on sort of time of year. At the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the year, I get pretty far ahead. Typically 3 or 4 books ahead, and then during summer, that
Mm-hmm.
gets eaten away pretty quickly, right? Because those books are releasing.
Yeah.
And I don't write sequentially in a series.
Mm-hmm.
I switch
Oh,
between
like hop
series,
around. Yeah.
right? And so I could be 3 or 4 books ahead, but all that means is that I'm 1 book ahead in every
Mm-hmm.
series,
Yeah.
right? And so I often will also not actually write 1 book a month.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, 1 month I'm writing 2 books, 1 month I'm
Mm-hmm.
writing 1.5 books, right?
Okay.
And so then during the summer, like July, I've hardly written anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
The end of June into July, I've written practically nothing. That will continue until about mid-August when I'll try to write a book, and
Mm-hmm.
then and then end of August, I'll be traveling for like 2 or 3 weeks straight into September, and then sort of end of September, I'll pick back up and
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep going. So I end up building a backlog and then chewing
Kind
through
of
it
going
really
through it. Yeah.
fast. Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Okay, so I do have a question since you are writing multiple series at the same time, but you're not writing them sequentially.
And you're not
And
reading multiple books at the same
and
time,
yes.
apparently, which I don't understand.
um, how do you keep your series straight and your
Hmm.
and all your details straight within your series without taking notes? Or do you have notes? Or I think I asked you about
Yeah,
Story Bible. You're like, it's all in my head. I'm like, what?
yeah. So I don't actually have a story Bible.
Hmm.
I'm in the process of building a tool to help with that, to solve that note-taking problem that I mentioned. I don't generally have a story Bible. I will take notes of things that are
Hmm.
important. Um, I have a really tight world building process that actually mitigates 90% of the uh, yeah, it just mitigates 90% of the problems. So
Gotcha.
the world building process is I choose the feeling that I want the reader to have, and then everything that I do relates to that feeling. And so that immediately creates coherence inside my world building. And when I have coherence, it's very easy to keep a mental map of everything that exists, right?
Can you give us an
The
example? It doesn't have to
Sure.
be like anything you've actually written, but just
Well,
like
I can
some
give you an
really
example of something I have written,
okay.
which is I wrote a series called Dreamer's Throne, and this one is probably the most concrete. A lot of times it's a bit more esoteric, but the feeling that I wanted to have, that everybody to have uh, for that series, is that there are monsters around every corner.
Mm.
And sometimes the monster is an actual monster. There are nightmares that are invading reality, right? Sometimes it's another person. The main character's dad isn't a good guy. He's pretty monstrous. And sometimes it's the main character. And so sometimes the story shifts a little bit, and the bad guys are like, "Oh my goodness, what's going on? Who's this guy we're trying to fight?" Because he ends up being sort of the grand villain of the entire world, just in an interesting way. But because everything relates back to that concept that there are monsters around every corner, every decision I make is connected to that feeling, right? And it becomes easy to then map, like, who are the characters? Well, every character has something slightly monstrous either about themselves or about their history.
Interesting.
And so I'm able to maintain all of those mental connections. Again, sort of a map of the world and the characters and their relationships because of that connective tissue that ties everything together. I do take notes. I have a different yellow pad for every book series that I write, and I just scribble whatever random things on there, as brief as possible to maintain flow. I'll often, though, if it's been a minute since I've written in a world, I'll go back and I'll read the last book or the last couple of books just to make sure that I'm not missing major plot points that need to be resolved, or things that that I promised the reader and that I haven't yet done. Um, but I also just have never had a particular issue with it. Um, I'm able to maintain these worlds pretty distinctly. Uh, I'm also very, very, very big on only writing interesting things, and I think that helps a lot too. Is that if you can minimize as much as possible the things that you don't find interesting, you maximize the number of things that you can keep in your head simultaneously, if that
Makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah. So we've kind of danced around the topic here, and I want to make sure we get to give you a chance to talk about this. But you have created a course that is for
Hmm.
people who are interested in dictation. So we want to definitely like promote that, send people
Sure.
over there. But yeah, tell us a little bit about this course, what people can expect from it, and then like kind of maybe some tips that you have for people who are interested in starting dictation. Kristen and I just were like, we want to maximize our productivity. And I
Sure.
think what's holding us back, which we both feel is, I mean, aside from just time in general, is the ability to get more books out. So I was a
Yeah.
ghostwriter for 8 years in the past. I've written 1 million words in a year, but that was physically. So like my best day was 15K,
Right.
which was a great day, but I was like limited by what my fingers can do and what my brain can hold.
Sure.
So like it's very attractive to us to hear like just you, and I know like EA Winters, Erin, she
Yep.
talks a lot about dictation as well. I've talked with her about it too. So yeah, like give us the inside view here.
Sure. So my course is a course on dictation, but it's actually my entire system from front to back. Dictation is awesome, but it needs a supporting structure, right? It's very hard to be efficient with it if you're just throwing it into whatever sort of superstructure you already have. Um,
Mm,
so I shared from ideation to completion. That is,
mm,
I have an idea. What do I do with it? How do I start the world building process? How do I start my plotting process? How do I plot in a way that helps me with my dictation? What do I need to do to dictate? Like what sort of technical setup do I need? Um, then how do I actually do it? What does drafting look like? One of the things that often surprises people is how slowly I speak when I dictate.
mm,
And again, I speak slowly because I'm trying to maximize my correctness, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to be as accurate as possible to the way I want it to be at the final result. But I have a bunch of tips and tricks for like, how do I even start this? How do I start learning it? We actually spend a good bit of time talking about skill acquisition, because it's one thing to be like, I want to learn how to dictate, or I want to learn how to, ride a unicycle. If you don't understand how skill acquisition works, then it's often going to be super frustrating and you're just going to give up. So instead of just jumping straight into dictation, there's actually a bunch of prep stuff that's like, we'll do this stuff first, and then it's going to be way easier for you to learn how to dictate. At this, that said, I think it took me about 13 hours to dictate, or to like switch mentally into dictation. And once that happened, it all of a sudden felt very natural. But on average, it takes about 20 hours to learn a skill. And that was pretty on point for me. Again, 13 hours before it stopped being really uncomfortable. And well, that's maybe 6 or 7 hours before it was stopped being really uncomfortable. But then 13 hours before it sort of clicked. And then another 7 hours of like, oh, this is still a little bit hard. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, no, now I'm hitting flow regularly. So it takes time to do. And so all of that is in the course. And then obviously revision, editing, the feedback loop, that kind of stuff is also attached to the course, with a little bit of like business organization stuff as well. Because one of the things that people often don't think about is it's fine and well and good to increase your productivity if your business cannot handle an increased number of books published, then there's not really much point, right?
Yeah.
So we talk a little bit about that as well. But dictation is like anything else. It's the same as typing. And I often talk to people who say, my brain doesn't work that way. The fact of the matter is your brain didn't work for typing before you learned how to type, right? It's just a skill. It's just a matter of learning how to communicate in that particular way. So one of the things we do to practice is that we will take something that you've already written that you really like, and we will read it. And we will just practice by reading so that you can start to get the sense of your cadence, the sense of what the final result should be, how your words should sound, right? I will say that it naturally changes the way you write, but not for the worse, for the better, because it becomes much more fluid. You can't. Sometimes you'll type something and you'll be like, "That's great," and then you read it aloud and you're like, "Ooh, that's not great. That does not make sense."
Yeah.
Well, this immediately eliminates that, because you have to say it out loud every time. And because you're then reading something that you really like, your brain starts to optimize the flow of the sentences and the flow of the story, right? It also helps you avoid having sentence structure that is exactly the same every time, because your brain goes, no, 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 we can't do that. That's going to be really disruptive if I'm just having exactly the same, if I'm speaking exactly the same sentence structure every time. So there's a bunch of ways that it will naturally start shifting your writing, but I think all of those benefit the reader, because it makes your work typically a lot easier to read, a lot smoother to read. So yeah, the course is fun also, though, because it's in a community, and so there are a bunch of other people who are going through it simultaneously. It's self-paced. You can do it at whatever pace you want. Once you get it, you have access to it forever. We are going to be adding a bunch of stuff to it as time goes on. The other thing that it gets you, though, is it gets you 3 months free for Bookscribe. And this is really the secret sauce. Yeah, this is the secret sauce. Dictation is one thing, and there are a lot of different methods for dictation. I tried a ton of them, and none of them worked for me. And the reason they didn't work is because it was too disruptive to my flow to have to speak all of the punctuation.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
we've built a tool that allows you to just dictate as if you were reading a book, which is exactly what I do. I imagine
Mhm.
myself, opening up a book in my mind that nobody has ever read before, and I just read it first, and then everybody else gets to read it after me, right? Well, because I'm able to do that, because I can just read through and I don't have to read any of the punctuation, and then this program adds in all of the punctuation afterwards, it makes the editing burden really, really light. And so I
Mhm.
can just focus on becoming the most efficient at, or more efficient at dictation, and
Mhm.
not have to worry about all of the editing burden that historically has come on the back end.
Mhm.
So that's the and again, getting the dictation course then gets you 3 months free of
Mhm.
Bookscribe, which is this processing thing.
Yeah.
And what's very exciting is that we are a week or so away, hopefully, of releasing something called Codex for
Oh.
that, which will actually do all of your note taking for you. It will, as
Oh.
you dictate, it will pull relevant information out and organize it like a wiki,
Oh, very
and
cool.
allow you then to correct it and edit it and do all of that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
it will continually build the connective tissue so that by the
Mhm.
time you finish a manuscript, you also have a world building Bible
That's
uh,
awesome.
that you can add to and adjust, right? And
Mhm.
then you can keep as a reference for your
Mhm.
next story, and you can actually use it as you're doing your next story. But then
Mhm.
it will again pull information, relevant information out, and add it to this wiki for you. And then
Mhm.
ultimately, the goal is to build it so that you can set stuff so that it can be customer facing, and so you
Oh,
can
yeah.
literally build something that can be used for yourself or your fans um,
Mhm.
as you go.
That's awesome. Well, because I was thinking, I put a glossary in the back of all of my
Yeah.
sci-fi books, at least, just because I like to make up words. I am curious to see how the dictation software would work with that. If you just go in and
So
like edit one word and then fix it
so
up.
the first time you do it,
Mm,
it will give you something garbled, and
right,
then you'll
right.
say this word that you didn't know what to do with is actually this word. And then
Mm-hmm.
from then on, every time
Mm-hmm.
it runs a transcript, it
That's
will
so
actually
cool.
correct for that word.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That
Oh
is
my
really
gosh.
cool.
Okay, sign me up. Like
Yes.
I'm convinced. Well,
Yep.
I've tried just like my hand at dictation, and I
Hmm.
started with a more simple concept for me. I also write romantic suspense and sweet romance, and so I was like, well, okay, I can see a very easy first person romantic suspense because it's you're just so much in their head. And so I've just started doing that on like walks here and there.
Hmm.
I know I'm not doing a good job, but and like the oh gosh, the
We're
transcribing is
we're
horrible.
s- we're still in that like awkward stage. This
Yeah.
feels really weird, and what am
Oh
I
yeah.
doing? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think like having you explain that process though is really helpful because it
Mhm.
is more than just, well, I'm going to pick up my phone and record something. It's
Correct.
you have to be like really thought through in like, okay, where are we headed in this, and to understand
Yep.
kind of like the reasons behind doing it in the way that you're doing it makes a
Yeah.
lot more sense to me versus just being like, well, let's just try this new thing and see if it works within the
Yeah.
process I've already established, which maybe is flawed
Well,
for that anyways.
and I think I'm really interested in like diving into the course and like
Hmm.
your process, because as somebody who doesn't plot and you're
Oh
now
yeah.
plotting, like,
Yeah.
because that's where I'm at. I don't like plotting. I hate plotting. I have
Yep.
tried it. I try it with every single book. I'm like, this is the
She
book that I'm going to
does.
plot. It does not work every single time.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like seeing a plotting perspective from somebody who is not a plotter, like that's fun.
Yeah. And really, all I'm doing, I mean, I can just explain it really quickly. What I do
Hmm.
is I, again, have a core concept, and that core
Hmm.
concept is everything is extrapolated from that core concept. Well, then I go through and I say, how many chapters do I think I want? In my case, it's going to be 45 to 47.
Mhm.
I'm
Hmm.
because that's about 115,000 to 120,000 words for me, um, based on my cadence. But then I just say, okay, what is the most important thing that has to happen in every chapter? I'll write that
Mhm.
down. What are the 5 beats that have to happen in order to get me to the next chapter? Cool. I'll write those down. And that's it. That's the
Mhm.
total amount of detail. And the only reason I even do that is because I need, as I'm dictating, as soon as I start to like lose the thread, I need to be able to look at something and go, okay, where's my signpost? That's it. I just now need to get to there. And then I need to go from
Yeah.
there to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. So they're really just functioning as like signposts to
Hmm.
get me to the next place, right? Often though, what happens is that I'm dictating and like things happen and like a character decides to go sideways and like, you know, uh, they they do something unexpected and then write like 3 chapters completely off of my plot, right? But then what's really cool is that it's very easy for me to just be like, okay, I don't need that chapter, I don't need that chapter, or I guess I just inserted 3 new chapters in here. Well, where do I go? Where's my signpost? Let me get there, and now I'm back on track, right? And so all it
Yeah,
does is
that's
it sort
awesome.
of reorients me a little bit. But
Hmm.
again, I'm the same way. I wrote my first, I think, 6 books without ever putting a single note down about the story. I just pants them all the way, and I really
Hmm.
enjoy that. It's just
Yeah.
that as you speed up,
Yeah.
it doesn't work as well because it takes so
Yeah.
much time to think through what it is
Hmm.
you're doing, right?
Mhm.
So,
Well, I
Yeah.
feel like that's exactly what happened with me when I was ghostwriting because I would just have like they were shorter books, so it's not as
mhm.
long to write, but I pantsed several of them. Some of them were cozy mysteries that I didn't even know who was the killer until the end, which is fun
Yeah,
because then neither does the reader. But then I got to a point where I was like, well, if I'm going to write this in like a week or 2 weeks, I have to have something
yeah,
there, or else I really will just get lost or be disrupted. So
yeah.
I can understand how that could be really helpful. So we're getting close to the end. We don't want to keep you too long here, but I wanted to throw in one last little question here, and you kind of hinted at it when you're mentioning that okay, you have to also consider your business
Yeah,
and your audience and like what they can support. So I was wondering if you could give us a little like mini crash course on Seth Ring and how you kind of came to publishing, because I know you're
sure.
indie published, but you also have like audiobooks and I don't know
Yeah,
all the things.
yeah,
So
sure.
just a little
So,
bit for our listeners.
I'm a hybrid author in that I write indie stuff or I publish indie and I also publish with publishers. So I have deals with Athon Books, who's the largest lit RPG publisher on the market, Blackstone, which is a big audio company.
Mhm.
They also publish physical and ebooks. I have a book coming out with Simon and Schuster on September 15th.
Oh.
Um, it's a re-release. It's a hardback of
Oh, is it
a
the
book,
Battle Mage
Battle Mage
or
Farmer.
yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and um, and so I do sort of the gamut, right? I don't have an agent. I self-represent in all of my deals. I'm self-publishing still. I've just started a new self-publishing series, and I'll probably continue that as I'm finishing out contracts with different publishers.
Mhm.
In my opinion, that is the way to do it. That is the best of both worlds.
Mhm.
Is to go hybrid, to self-publish, and then to traditionally publish. They give you different things. Typically, if you want to make money, you should self-publish because you get to keep, even if it's a smaller pie, you
Mhm.
get to keep the whole pie.
Mhm.
Uh, on the other hand, if you want a larger pie, if you want better distribution, if you want access to places you can't get into as an indie, if you want the relationships that come with a traditional publisher, you just have to work out deals with traditional publishers. And so they give you 2 different things, but both things are important and necessary. My background is in sales and sales management and business development. So I came to this industry pretty naturally,
Yeah.
and the business side of this industry pretty naturally. I started my first series self-published. I was able to figure out how to build an audience funnel for that, and grew that to the point where I could go full time on it, and then immediately went, wait a second, if I want to expand my business, grow my business, I either need uh, I either need my own personal labor leverage. That is, I have to hire people to do things so that I can write more because writing is something only I can do for my business, or I have to hire a publisher, right? in the way a publishing contract works is you are hiring the publisher, they are not hiring you. This is something that's very important to understand. If they give you an advance and then they take 50% of your royalties or 70% of your royalties, depending on your deal or however much, you have hired them for that amount of your future profit, your future earnings, to publish your book, right? It is not them giving you a contract. Yes, they are giving you an advance payment for the privilege of taking your money later, right? So understand what it is you're actually getting.
Yeah.
Most people think about that relationship completely backwards.
Mm-hmm.
In actuality, you are hiring the publisher. So I hired a publisher. They approached me, but I did hire them to publish Battle Mage Farmer because I wanted to speed up my releases. I wanted to write more books in a year, and I was capped in the amount of labor leverage that I had, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that has started shifting. I've started hiring my own contractors and my own, people internally to do some of that publishing stuff but I'm still, again, hiring publishers to get access to distribution, right?
Yeah.
I think the big thing that I would recommend for people is there is a ton of advice about building an author business. Most of it does not apply to you. 90% of it will not apply to you. The two things you really need to know are how am I getting audience and how am I getting books, right?
Yeah.
How long does it take me to write a book, and how fast can I make that? And how am I actually getting people awareness, right? How am I getting people to buy my books? And if you can address those two problems, you can scale tremendously. Until you hit the 7-figure range, you're not going to have to worry about anything else. Just figure out how to get a lot of books and figure out how to get a lot of audience.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Love it.
I forgot. We did have one other question. Because of your enormous output, how do you
Yes.
avoid burnout? Or do you ever face that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The burnout is a mismatch of expectation, right? That's all it actually is. When you are putting in effort and you are getting nothing back, or you are not getting what you expect back, you will burn out. That is just how it works. And so having clarity around your expectation allows you to not only avoid burnout, but it allows you to then manage your trajectory really well. So my recommendation to anybody who is writing or writing a lot is just have a very clear expectation of what you get out of it. And that is less than you think. That is always the answer, right? If you're going to put out, 10 books a year, expect to grow slow. Because if you're spending all of that time putting out books, you are not spending that time on getting audience. Now, if you're focused the other way, if you're focused on social media, if you're focused on marketing, if you're focused on live events, expect your revenue to grow slowly, right? In both cases, because one, I may have a lot of books, but maybe my audience isn't growing as fast as other people's. Or I have a lot of audience, but I only have 1 or 2 or 3 books for them to buy. And so my lifetime value of each customer is actually really small, right? Because the person's only paying $15, like max, right, for my books. And so understand that every time you make a decision, you introduce a new constraint. And if your expectation is that you're going to do something and it's just going to have wildly successful results, chances are you're going to burn out on it because you might get it, and that would be nice. I hope you do, but it's not the norm, right? Yeah. So I think setting your goals and setting your expectations with longevity in mind, that's the key to avoiding burnout. I'm going to do it in 20 years, right? Yeah. I don't need to be a household name next year. I'm going to do it in 20 years. And if I set that trajectory and if I set that expectation and I then work as hard as I can to get there, I will probably actually get there earlier. But more importantly, I'm getting as close to guaranteeing that in 20 years I will actually be there as possible. If on the other hand, it's like by next year, I'm going to be a household name, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Chances are I'm going to burn out.
Well, that's good. And that's honestly what we've talked about here before. I always remind myself too, because I see authors ahead. I mean, you're a great example. You've got a lot of books out, and I think like that's awesome. And I want to be there. I could be there. But I also know I just have my first series out. I'm just a baby.
Yep.
You're just growing, and growing is
Right.
good. You have to start somewhere. So
That's right.
great words of advice. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Oh man, we have a
Absolutely.
lightning round. I think Kristen's gonna read off those questions. So just
Sure.
whatever comes to mind, go ahead and
Okay.
share. And if nothing comes to mind, we can skip to the next one. It's nothing
Yeah,
too
for sure.
deep.
Okay.
What are your top 3 favorite books that come to mind?
The Bible is the best book.
Mhm.
And then I don't think about books, I think about authors, but Terry Pratchett and Edgar Rice Burroughs, their whole
Oh,
catalogs, I could read all of them every day.
So good.
Awesome. What is your favorite writing snack?
I really like apples and peanut butter.
Mm.
You get the sugar and you get the it's really sad
Protein.
that yeah, you get the protein. It's really sad that everything I do is just so based around optimization.
It's okay. I mean,
It's
apples and
great.
peanut butter is a great snack. So
It is.
Yeah.
It
I
is.
feel
It is. Do you listen to music when you write?
Yes, and actually I change the kind of music that I'm listening to depending on how clicked in my brain is, because that allows me to adjust the difficulty of the task, which is one of the requirements for getting into flow.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite artist that you like listening to, or composer, or?
No, I just listen to I'll like pick something familiar and then I'll just listen to whatever Spotify throws.
Mhm.
But I'm aiming for a degree of complexity in the music that allows me to fine tune where my brain is. So I have ADD and I don't take medication for it. I just manage it through like systems, and I think that's why I'm so like obsessed with optimization. But I actually fine tune the music I listen, or like I fine tune my work environment and that's one of the levers that I can crank.
Interesting. Does it have words? Because I cannot listen to music with words when I write.
Sometimes yes, because
Oh,
if
see,
it has words, it drastically increases the level of difficulty. And so if I'm writing something that is very familiar to me and I'm feeling bored with what I'm writing, I can actually add words, and all of a sudden it requires more of my brain. And so the little bit of my brain that's like left is tuned for the task.
That's awesome.
That's very cool.
Okay, so do you have a tip for getting into flow quickly?
Yeah, so flow is simply based on 3 things: clarity of goal, degree of difficulty, and anticipation of reward. So if you can fine tune those 3 things, what is the reward you're anticipating? What is the difficulty of the task as related to your skill level? And are you clear about what you are trying to accomplish? If you can fine tune those 3 things, that's why I said that I use music as a lever on the difficulty side. But if you can fine tune those 3 things, you will enter flow. Like, it is guaranteed. So you can actually build flow triggers into your process so that you can adjust these levers and ultimately end up getting into flow whenever you want.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, one last question, but I kind of feel like this whole episode is just like
The answer to this question.
Yes. But what is one piece of writing advice that you have?
I'm going to give you something spicy. You don't need critique from other writers. You need critique from other readers, because you are probably a good enough writer already. And what you need to do is you need to match with the people who will be reading your book. If you want to do this not at an amateur level, but at a professional level, you need to match with the people who are going to be reading your book, and they have different tastes. Authors have their own personal taste. They also have a bias towards what is taught as good literary writing advice. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that is advice for authors. And what you need as a professional is you need to be in tune with what your readers want to read, and you need to match your creative vision to their preference, right? And if you cannot do that, you need to go find new readers. You don't need an author to tell you what they would do with your story. You're probably creative enough, you're probably good enough as a writer already. I think that critique from other authors is a distraction, and you should instead go and get your core audience and get them to tell you what they think.
Oh, I like it.
But okay, so go ahead and just tell us. We will drop this in our show notes, but where can people find you and your course, all the things?
Sure. So if you type Seth Ring into Google, I will never leave you alone because my retargeting is really strong.
We've noticed that.
Yeah.
For this episode. Oh, there he is again.
I'm telling you, it's really good. But SethRing.com is my website. It'll get you pretty much wherever you need to go. And you can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok and Facebook and X, all the places. For the course specifically, if you just type Seth Ring dictation course into Google, again, it'll pop up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on.
Oh,
Yes,
for
we
sure.
do.
It's been a pleasure.